Welcome back, and if you are just joining us, this is Daybreak on Trust TV, and it's now time for us to look at front pages of today's newspapers. And we have in the studio Mukhtar Suleiman, a public affairs analyst and also communication expert, who will be joining us to shed light on some of the stories that dominate the front pages today. And we'll start with today's edition of Daily Trust newspapers, which says, the major headline of this of Daily Trust today is military kills 5 ISWAP commanders, over 200 terrorists in Borno. And it has riders, they are using Northeast as training ground, according to a source. We will continue to fight them, Nigerian Air Force. And insurgents attacked Borno mosques, killed Imam, 3 others. This is the lead story on today's Daily Trust, and it continues on page 4. Just below that, 2 dead, several trapped as 7-story building collapses in Lagos. And then beside the pictorial, 2023, anxiety trails APC's delay in unveiling campaign council members. Story on page 38. 14 die, 1,179 cases recorded as yellow fever hits 35 states and FCT. And lastly, despite increased revenue by manufacturers, cement price still hover 4,000 per 50 kg. Story on page 27. These are the stories on the front page of today's Daily Trust newspaper.
All right, with that, we move on to the Nation newspaper. The lead story here says NNPCL petrol to sell for 462 naira per litre without subsidy. And then we have riders that says Corporation Defense 68 million per litre daily consumption claim. Dares Customs CG ready for forensic audit. We also have PDP crisis, hope dims for reconciliation. At the top of the page there, IG to US government, no threat to next year's election. ASU raises 7-man panel to counter smear campaign. We also have 15-year jail term awaits land grabbers in Oyo. Banks cut work hours to save operational costs. And then 2 died, dozens trapped as 7-story building collapses in Lagos. We also have Nigeria seeks debt for climate swap deal to get relief on $100.06 billion, says presidency. And these are some of the stories on front page of the Nation newspaper.
Well, up next is the Punch newspaper. And the main story is about Abakari. NDLEA files 24 charges, seizes 14 mega assets. Agency uncovers shopping malls, others owned by ex-IRT commander. Kari Deputy Ubwa fails to declare 100 million life insurance policy. And then, of course, below this is a pictorial showing the recent building collapse in Lagos. 2 dead, others trapped in Lagos building collapse. And on the top of the page, contract termination, FG to pay foreign firm $496 million. Sorry, on page 28. Then below that, Ogun, Lagos, Rivers communities battle hazardous waste. Story on page 2. And then NNPC defends 68 million litre daily consumption, bags forensic audit. Atiku, no threat to Tinubu, Obi, social media creation. Onanuga, story on page 7. And then by the Punch, by the newspaper's masthead, subscribers fail to use 98.75 million SIMs report. And then Discos lose 543 billion power generation drops by Discos, I'm taking that again. Discos lose 443 billion power generation drops by 642.4 megawatts. Story on page 27. These are stories on the front page of the Punch this morning.
All right, up next is Leadership newspaper. At the top of the page there, we are open for forensic audit of fuel supply, says NNPC. Senate gets bill to amend Section 84, ban same-faith tickets. Just below the masthead there, we have Customs evaluation policy fueling smuggling, motor dealers cry out. And we also have the lead story that says as 2023 campaign begins in 23 days, Nigerians seek competence above party, religious, ethnic considerations. We have writers under that same story. Say next president must be competent, healthy, and of good character. We want leaders who can get this nation out of the woods. No threat to next year's elections, IGP assures Nigerians. We have more stories. Again, immigration emerges best performing agency. Kenya's Supreme Court to rule on presidential election dispute today, and heirs holding appoints Ndubisi Osadolo as board members. And these are some of the stories on leadership.
Okay, next is This Day newspaper. On top of the page, Nigeria's average daily petrol supply in 68 million liters, NNPC clarifies. Replies Custom DG, says company ready for forensic audit. Analyst held 20-year crude supply deal with Dangote refinery. Northern Group call for petroleum subsidy removal. FG, 14 years old, Ajakuta Steel dispute finally resolved. Story on page 8. And then below the masthead, Obi's crowdfunding portals to open next week, Utomi reveals. And then Atiku, September heralds dawn of Nigeria's freedom from APC stronghold, says decentralizing campaign structure is only way to win in 2023. Reaffirms 40% commitment to women, youth in the cabinet. Stakeholders weigh options on PDP crisis. The big story on today's This Day is Tinubu, we need not to worry about PDP, we are not equals. And it has riders says opposition party shouldn't exist any longer. Our presidency will industrialize Nigeria, Shetima boasts. PDP fires back, asks APC candidate to address name, age, education. Uzodinma declares Igbo will produce president when they find peace with nation. And these are the stories on the front page of This Day newspaper.
We'll take the final paper, which is Blueprint newspaper, and we have just at the top of the page there, developer of collapsed Lagos building defied authority tries, commissioner. We also have says developer hostile to regulatory agency, police on the trail of culprits. We also have presidency, that's the lead story there. Senate mulls a ban on same-faith ticket, and we have writers that say amendment to Section 84 of 2022 Electoral Act on the same card. Odds still favor Tinubu Shetima ticket for 2023, says Smart Adeyemi. Stop blaming your woes on APC, Okechukwu tells Ayu. PDP won't implode. Crisis family affair, Atiku associates reply critics. Gunmen attack Enugu chapter during meeting. And you can find details of that story on page 6. And below the story is pictorial of a rescue operation at the site of the collapsed 7-story building at Obaidowu Oniru Street in Lagos on Sunday. We have more stories here. FG to disburse $350 million cabotage fund to indigenous ship owners. We also have gunmen kill NSCDC operative, abduct 14 others in Ekiti, Ondo. How debt for climate swap offers billion-dollar relief to Nigeria. Africa's debt burden, says Oshibajo. We also have investors lose 283 billion naira August amid insecurity, low purchasing power. And on the footnotes there, flood destroys 3,000 houses, farmlands in Jigawa. 9 die, 10 injured in Abuja auto crash. NIS wins MDA's award for August CG Lords personnel. POS transactions increased to 8.3 trillion naira, and mutilated body of Tescom chief found in Akure. And these are the stories on the Blueprint newspaper.
Okay, well, let's now look at some of these stories. And of course, as we said earlier, we have in the studio Mukhtar Suleiman, a public affairs our first commentator in the studio with us. Mukhtar, if you look at today's Daily Trust and, of course, quite a number of other papers reported about the feats recorded by our troops in the northeast on the insurgents, members of Boko Haram insurgency groups. And, in the past, we are used to a lull in operations during the rains. Are we having a game changer? Are we having a new vigor in the military? What is the significance of what has happened over the weekend?
Good morning.
Good morning,
Yeah.
thank you.
I think I'm not a security person, but I'll speak as an ordinary citizen. A change in strategy is good. The military is now doing things that are not precedented, that are not expected. People don't expect them to do it, so that is actually the best time for you to do it. That's when you actually hit your enemies the most. So taking that action, especially with the rain, despite going into that situation the way it is, I think that's why they actually achieved what they did, and which is a very good thing. ISWAP is more deadlier than Boko Haram, if anything, that we've learned over the past few months. And I think it's best that they keep up the pace, and we applaud them for it.
Okay, but despite the achievement, you're still getting pockets of attacks, here and there. And the latest being insurgents attacking Borno Mosque, killing Imam and 3 others.
I think it's normal. It's a fight that we fight. The attack, we attack, the attack, we attack. It's sad and sickening and painful as well. That's the way it has deteriorated to where the ordinary civilians are now casualty of a crisis that otherwise does not affect them. That they shouldn't really have a say in it, but then again, it's the situation of the country as it is. I would remember that there was this, I said this here before, there was this UNDP report I read some years ago where the report says less than 9.28% or 9.2 something percent of Boko Haram members joined Boko Haram because of religion. The most of them joined because they were aggrieved about the way the military handled the situation at the start. They wanted revenge. Some of them were poor. Boko Haram promised better payment and better life, and that's why most of them actually joined the forces. So you talk to them and then they tell you, oh, they were aggrieved. Nigeria offended them. They wanted to revenge. But then you're taking your anger on me. I was also offended. If I also pick up arms and started up my own this thing, it doesn't make sense. I think there are constitutional ways to handle most of these grievances. There's a grievance mechanism as stipulated by the Constitution that you should actually use to express yourself whenever you feel like you've been shortchanged as a citizen. I think we need to adopt that more often, as opposed to using that as an excuse to join the violent group.
Okay, issues of
Okay, well, just
building.
before you go ahead, we'll actually like to take a quick break, and when we return, we'll continue.
To every politician, as the campaigns gain momentum and passions begin to rise, remember, the errors of your opponents do not make you a success. Do not run down your opponent and inflame passions to violence between and among your supporters. What counts is what you plan to do for the electorate and how you intend to relieve their sufferings and bring succor. Nigeria is in dire need of patriotic leaders at all levels, leaders who will make national development their priority. Concentrate on telling the electorate what you intend to do when you get into office. Focus on making your vision clear to the electorate. Don't engage in verbal abuses, fake news or speeches. Keep dealing with issues that will bring progress. You win the hearts and minds of the people by being above board, by being civil, patriotic, and showing empathy. Let's join hands to make the 2023 elections peaceful. A message from the National Orientation Agency.
Okay, welcome back, and thank you for staying with us. We still have in the studio Mukhtar Suleiman, who is also, helping us this morning to analyze some of the issues on the front pages of Nigerian newspapers as part of our breakfast show, the Daybreak on Trust Television. Mukhtar, we were talking about, I wanted to ask about this issue of building collapse. Almost all the papers today have this story on the front page. Two persons killed and many others trapped after a collapse of 7-story building in Lagos. And this is becoming one too many. Remember only a few days earlier, maybe less than a week, in Kano there was something like this which also killed some, 2 persons also. What's responsible for this?
I think one thing I've noticed is during rainy season we usually have these issues. With the weather, it tends to test the integrity of structures that have actually been constructed. We have an agency that is responsible for checkmating most of these issues, just to make sure that there's actually standards. And then, to the best of my knowledge, how a building construction comes up is the person who wants to build it has an idea, gives it to an architect structures it out, gives it to an engineer monitors the builder who is going to be building, ensuring that there's integrity in the structure. So if we're having this continuously, it means somebody is not doing their job very well. And if somebody is not doing their job very well, it actually tampers with it puts people at risk, let me put it that way. And the government needs to do more and look into it. We had this issue, we always have it in Lagos almost every year, every rainy season, where buildings begin to collapse when the rain starts. So I think that needs to really be checked, because it's becoming it's becoming more and more issues. A building structure, especially structures as big as that, is a matter of public trust, because a lot of people are going to go in there and come out. You're not going to build it for just yourself. So because of that, you have to also put into consideration the life of the people that are going to come through that building, even your own personal life. And even if the building should fall today, who else will be affected? That's not even in the building. That has nothing. That doesn't concern them. So this is actually a public matter that the government needs to look into to ensure that buildings are actually up to standard.
All right, let's move on to this story. It's on health, by the way. Talking about 14 died, 1,179 cases recorded as yellow fever hits 35 states and the FCT. First it was COVID, and then monkeypox, and now we're seeing a yellow fever, being endemic in Nigeria. What's your take on this?
Yellow fever has actually been a thing that has been it's almost as old as malaria in Nigeria.
Yeah, but it hasn't been this
it's bad. Yeah. But I don't know why it's actually an endemic right now. I've not really read in-depth into it. I know I saw the headline, but I just passed through, which was very wrong. But I think there's another thing that Nigerians do that is quite unfair. Most of us travel a lot. Everybody has a yellow fever card, but very few people actually took the yellow fever shot. And which is very, very wrong. I think the medical practitioners need to also look into that and ensure that before you issue out the card, please give the person the shot, so that the essence of it is so that we are safe as a people. So it doesn't kill you, it just protects you. I don't see any reason why it should be an issue. I know a lot of people made a fuss about the COVID vaccine. Most of us are vaccinated. I'm still waiting for the day I'll turn into a mutated robot. But medical practitioners need to do more to ensure that people actually take these shots and they take it very seriously.
So, but what issue of our health preparedness? If you look at in the face of all these epidemics and public health challenges, as Usena was talking about, monkeypox, rotavirus now, so many other things, and even COVID is going and coming. It's not like today it lulls and then it resurges and all that. How do you assess our readiness to confront some of this problem, especially also looking at a global level of partnership of working together to ensure that humanity overcomes some of these challenges?
In Nigeria specifically, I think we need to do more first infrastructurally. If we can do more infrastructurally, we will be able to handle most of us. We're not short of talent. Now we're having doctors leaving the country. Last week we saw a report where they said 1 doctor to 5,000 persons now, which is which is too much. That's too much of a burden. And if you look at those doctors, that is 1 doctor to 5,000. If you ask them, it's because they are still not, they want to leave, but they don't know how to leave.
Or they're making plans.
Yeah, or they're making plans as well. So it's really, really sickening. And if we can do, I strongly believe that if we can do a lot about the infrastructural base of our health system, we need to do more in terms of the welfare of the health workers. We can actually do way much more. We can actually achieve way much more in ensuring that we're actually proactive and we are at the vanguard of ensuring that most of these epidemics don't go out of hand.
Okay, now let's look at the story on the front page of The Punch, where it's saying that the federal government is to pay a foreign company, a foreign firm, $496 million over termination of contract. This is also something that is so much recurring. We have had cases of P&ID. We have had cases of, other cases. Recently, there was one in the news about I'm trying to remember, that recently made the headlines, which was also, involves the federal government paying, the Azura Power, if you remember. Why do we every now and then end up in cases like this, where it seems that maybe some individuals just insert clauses that indemnify the country unnecessarily?
I've not really read the story, so I don't really know the whole of it. So I might not want to talk too much about it because I'm not in the full picture of it. But one thing I'm.
That's why my question is generic about cases like this, in which you see that the government is like being put in a very tight indemnity corner.
Yeah.
Like
just to add to what he said, take a look at foreign airlines, and the aviation sector crisis as well. The government owing these foreign airlines, a lot of money, putting them in that position.
Yeah, I think before I go into the airline issue, that of the contract, I think one thing I've noticed is that Nigerians in general, we tend to not read contracts very religiously. Like sometimes I want to draft a contract, maybe I have an organization, I want to draft a contract for my staff. I just call my friend, Afa, do you have any contract that let me use it for? And we did not study it, we did not get the intent and most of it. And the ambiguity in any contract favors the party that did not draft it. So if I draft a contract for you and there's an ambiguous clause, it's how you translate it at the end of it. I might translate it with intent, but the law does not cover intent. It covers what is there. So if you put etc is not something. If it's not clear, at the end of the day, I can actually use that as a loophole. Being someone who, I signed a lot of contracts for consultancy works and even my day-to-day job, and we see this play out way too often. I think one of the first things I usually do whenever I have a contract is I read it carefully to see the loophole, just in case the organization wants to exploit me. That's one of the few, and I think a lot of people, I learned that from a friend of mine in the US, that said that's the same thing he actually does. I'm not intending to do anything wrong, I'm just saying I have to protect my interest as well, because most times an organization is usually more loyal to its mission and vision than the individual staff, depending on the nature of the culture of that organization. And I think that's usually been the situation in Nigeria. Actually, our politicians, even laws, will go and copy and paste contracts. I'm sure that contract, whoever it is that terminated the contract to start with, did not read most of the indemnity clauses, did not read most of the exit clauses of the contract, and that's why we actually put ourselves in these situations. That of the airlines is a very precarious one. It's very broad. It has so many layers and layers and layers. Adi Serika has not really done a very good job in the airline sector, honestly. We expected so much from him. I thought he was going to do very well, owing to the fact that he had really good experience in the sector, but it has been from one tussle to another. I booked a flight to Kano for this week. I booked it last week and I paid about 75,000. I remember when that was the business class ticket for return, for a return ticket. It's just, the sector is so weird, and now even a lot, I think Delta Airlines in the US is planning to pull out by next month, I'll be by the end of the month, although Emirates has resumed again after the last the payment that they were giving, but there's still layers and layers and layers. Every day they peel off a new layer, and then we see what's happening there. The Dubai is having this. We're having issues with the Dubai government. It's just, I don't know. It's just too much.
Okay, all right. So let's move on to the Nation newspaper, and there's this very interesting, story here that made rounds, during the weekend, talking about banks cutting work hours to save operational costs.
Yes.
At first it was, the Kaduna State government cutting work days, and then you have now banks cutting work hours. That's besides or aside a lot of people losing, employment. The unemployment rate is actually way high now, and then even if the banks decide to cut this, work hours, a lot of people would actually lose their jobs as well. Let's share your thoughts on this.
Cutting work hours for a banking sector is I'm sure it's a very tough decision for them to have made, because you can imagine how much banks make on a daily basis, and they need those revenue streams for them to actually be sustainable. When I saw the news earlier in the weekend, I knew that it has really gotten very bad, because if there's any sector who overworks their staff and does not want them to leave the office, it's the bank. I have a banker as a cousin who goes to work from 6 o'clock in the morning, doesn't return sometimes till 10 p.m. So if they've actually come to that conclusion that they need to reduce working hours, then you can actually tell that we didn't expect, we knew it was bad, but it's as if it's been a downward slope ever since. There's this slippery slope effect that's been happening ever since. It has been getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And it's almost getting to that situation where even they don't know what to do to stop it. So everybody's just looking at the ball just going down the hill. So I'm thinking, I'm hoping that it gets better. That's what we can all hope for. We pray that it does get better. But for banks to actually do that, I saw the news.
Really bad.
I said it has really become really bad.
Yeah, so still on the Nation newspaper, if you look at the lead story there, it's talking about NNPC Limited, talking about if we remove subsidy, the petrol will go up to 462 naira per litre. If the government removes subsidy, and corporation depend 68 million per litre daily consumption. And DS Customs CG at the weekend, or was it on last week, the Comptroller General of the Nigerian Customs Service said that the NNPC cannot defend the 68 million daily consumption, 68 million litres that it claims Nigerians consume daily. And I know that this is not the first time that figure is being cautioned. That's one stream of the argument. Then the issue of the subsidy, which is the main lead here, that if subsidy is removed, we will buy petrol at 462. What are your thoughts on this issue of the figure itself, of the consumption figure, and which generated this controversy? And then the second stream of the question is the issue of subsidy, to be or not to be.
Okay, for that was the 68 million litres, but let's assume that is true, for the sake of argument. Let's say, because NNPC obviously gave us the figure, they should know. In a world where everybody is looking to move away from fossil fuel, burning fossil fuel, we're looking at how we can combat climate change. Nigeria is saying proudly, and they are saying they can defend it, that Nigerians are consuming 68 million litres on a daily basis. Now, I'm going to tie this to the fact, to that of the fuel subsidy. I personally don't have an issue if the government say they want to remove fuel subsidy. I get it. It sounds outrageous, but if you're going to remove the fuel subsidy, ensure that Nigerians do not have to strive to get secondary source of power. That 68 million litres, I don't know the figures, but off the top of my head, I can say more than half of it goes into generating secondary source of power, fueling your mostly fueling your generators. That's what I think most of that money most of those litres go into. So if you can ensure that there's ample primary supply of power, there is a stable power in the country, remove the fuel subsidy. That way we know that people who are going to go and buy fuel at 400 plus are using it for their cars, and cars are somewhat luxury. Ensure that there is adequate internal transport network for people to actually commute from their houses to work or wherever it is that they want to go to, so that people do not have to drive their cars unless they necessarily have to or need to. So that way we know that buying petrol is actually a luxury that you can afford to buy. Then remove the subsidy. That way, the common man is not affected, because most of the common men don't even have cars. They don't even have automobiles. But they have to buy, they have a better pass my neighbor somewhere outside in their houses. So they have to buy petrol for that. So if you can ensure that there's adequate power supply, primary source of power supply, and I don't have to strive to get a secondary source, then go ahead and, because most countries don't have subsidy for fuel, but they've ensured that that does not affect the person who knows that he cannot afford it at the end of the day, which is quite unfair.
All right, so what's your opinion on the story on page 6 on Leadership newspaper that says Senate gets bill to amend Section 84 and also ban same-faith tickets?
Now, I don't know what section of the Section 84 they want to. I feel like, you see, I love, whoever drafted the Electoral Act, I need to meet that person and hug him. Honestly, I was so happy at the strategic way it was placed. This is why. If you look at the part that actually affects them the most, which is Section 8412, that's the part that actually affects them the most. The person did not lead with it in Section 84. And the person did not even lead with it in the opening sentence of Section 8412. And like I've established earlier, like I've said earlier, Nigerians hardly read in detail whenever they are going through something.
Browse through.
They just browse through. I'm sure that most of those politicians did not study that thing very carefully before they assented to it, which is a good thing. I've always, this...
So they were ambushed.
Yeah, this sort of backs up my argument where I said the only way Nigeria will be better is by mistake. Someday we'll just keep making mistakes that will just be leading to better, the betterment of the systems. I'm really happy about it. I don't know what part of Section 84 they want to amend, but I'm glad. I hope that they don't get the backing to actually do it. As for banning of same-faith tickets, I don't think that should be a thing. I've always argued against it, though. I don't think whether it's same faith, whether it's different faith, doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter. I think we should, if we are claiming that we are actually now focusing on the competencies of candidates, we should focus on the competencies of candidates. And we should, I understand the nuance around it. I understand that you cannot just shrug it off because people have personal stake in their religious belief and they want to feel as if they are adequately represented at the top level of the government. But I don't think at this point, if a person is a good person, is a good person. So I don't think same faith or not same faith would even matter at the end of the day. So I just think that it should be, let's see how it goes there, inshallah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mukhtar Suleiman, for being with us this morning, and we hope to have you another time on the program.